Now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Good service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
Welcome back to Warrior Creed, and it's me, the radical Maajid Nawaz, and my brother, as always, the infamous Usman Raja. How's it going, Usman? Salams.
Yeah, good. Hot over here, Jim. I'm in the UK, so
nice. Well, as you can see, I'm in a different room again. I'm still away from the UK, not from the studio, but of course, as usual, we will carry on with these live streams. Much has happened. Some of you may have seen from the video that was uploaded on Warrior Creed to advertise this show that we were going to discuss what I've called Elon Musk's WEF Handmaiden, Linda Yaccarino's recent assertion that Twitter continues to censor people by using the terms lawful but awful content that she wants to remove there. We are going to discuss that topic, but it's going to come up as second on this live stream today, because over the course of last night, what happened was, many of you may well know, that Donald Trump was indicted yet again for a fourth time, this time in Georgia. And we said on last week's live stream, if you recall, that's what was going to happen. And we were addressing the perspective that MAGA are putting forward as to what they think is going to happen. And we explained for everybody their view that they think these indictments are going to do them a favor. So we're going to kick off with the topic of Hillary Clinton celebrating those indictments. She happened to be on Rachel Maddow's show at exactly the same time as Donald Trump's indictment occurred. And so we're going to kick off discussing that, show you a few of the clips there of her on the Rachel Maddow show. It was incredibly curious timing that she was on the Rachel Maddow show at that time. And then we'll move to Linda Yaccarino, the person who is now the CEO of the platform, formerly known as Twitter. But let me kick off by just showing you exactly how Hillary Clinton received the news of Donald Trump's fourth indictment, and just on Maddow, at exactly the moment that these 10 new indictments from Georgia dropped. This is what Hillary Clinton thought it was wise to do.
I can't believe this.
Yeah, this is not the circumstances in which I expected to be talking to you.
Nor me, Rachel. It's always good to talk to you, but honestly, I didn't think that it would be under these circumstances. Yet another set of indictments.
This is something.
So the laughter there you saw, incredible. I think at this stage, all I'll say is he who laughs last, I should say, laughs the hardest. And when it comes to Hillary Clinton, there's certainly a lot of criminality that needs to be investigated. And I suspect there's a lot more to this story than we're seeing. But there's a fuller clip that I'd like to show everybody. And that is exactly how Hillary Clinton has decided to pitch this recent string of indictments against Donald Trump. Before I show this clip, I think it's important to remember the following. And that is that when you think of exactly what's been going on in the world since, I don't know, since it became visible to everyone at least, and that is the COVID mandate period and onwards, but I'd say even before that, one key thing to keep in mind is that the way these people work, everything is inversion and everything is projection. What they accuse others of is exactly what they are. Now, you can look at those allegations that float around, whether it be the allegations of Donald Trump being some form of sex pest. I don't know, perhaps he's got some, less than desirable traits of his personality. I'm sure he has. We've criticized him many times for those, not just on this show, but previously on other platforms as well. And that's all over the internet for everybody to check. Just look up my views on him and as a so-called Muslim ban, which is the word he used during the campaign period. So let's not pretend he's a saint. But one thing I'm going to say is that it's important to understand the way these globalists work. And I don't include him, by the way, in the phrase globalist when I speak. And that is that everything is projection by inversion. Whatever they say If you think of exactly the opposite, that's what's happening. Now, I can guarantee you that's the case. Just apply it all the way back to the COVID mandate period. These vaccines save lives. No, they killed people, right? Lockdowns work. No, they cause more harm than they did any good. Masks protect you from the virus. The opposite was true. Hunter Biden's laptop is fake. It turns out to be real. Everything they say. Trump was involved in Russia collusion. It turns out that he wasn't. And the guy investigating him for Russia collusion has just pled guilty for colluding with Russia. The guy that debunked, the so-called debunked, the Pizzagate theory was convicted recently of pedophilia. The guy that was boasting that he debunked the story that there's so-called VIP pedophile rings has just pled guilty to pedophilia. So this is a general rule of thumb. Before I play what's coming up next, I want everybody to remember every single thing they say, the exact opposite is the truth. And what I hope I've just done by recalling for you all of these recent examples, and in fact, I'll show you just to drive the point home before I play the clip, that everything they say, the opposite is the truth. This is the principle of inversion, and people that are evil think good is bad and bad is good. They have flipped they have turned upside down ordinary moral paradigms, which is why they genitally mutilate children, thinking it's called liberation. So have a look at this and understand something, that when we say these things, it's with a track record. From day one, before my cancellation on the corporatist, at what used to be called mainstream, I say corporatist media channel, Global's LBC, when I had a show there before my cancellation, I was on air live broadcasting to the nation that Hunter Biden's laptop was genuine from day one. Proves to be true. They said it was Russian disinformation. The exact opposite was true. Anti-COVID mandates from day one. From day one, before my cancellation, we were critical of them. Turns out it was true. Jan 6, we said that it was a false flag event. They said it was the people storming Parliament. We said it was a false flag event. Turns out to be true, since Tucker Carlson especially released the CCTV footage from inside Congress, literally showing police officers lifting the ropes, letting people in and giving them tours of Congress. And then more recently, even more footage has been released in which the police are seen asking the police officers there, how do we identify the undercover cops? And they're told, you'll know them because they have wristbands on their wrists. So the whole thing was a false flag operation. Again, before my cancellation, I was saying that live on air on LBC. That's the point, as you see there in brackets, at which I got cancelled. So I got cancelled there, but then you continue. The Ukraine war deceit, the exact opposite of what they said is and was true. And you only need to look at Sam Bankman-Fried and what happened with the money laundering that to understand, and the charges he's facing, that they were using the entire thing as a money laundering operation rather than to liberate Ukraine. And of course, they painted it out as if Zelensky was the freedom fighter hero. And the exact opposite is true. DeSantis, how we called him out, Wagner and the non-coup in Russia. And as I say there at the bottom there, the US election integrity is pending. That's the next thing that you're going to see unravel. But every single one of their narratives, the exact opposite is what's true. So when you listen to Hillary Clinton speak now, just think the opposite of her words and you'll see what I mean. This is an interesting experiment. Everything she says, oh, we need to be able to trust our institutions. People that think that they have the, that can call into question elections, they want to be authoritarian, they want to be dictators. They're talking about themselves. And this is why I'm giving it this prelude. When you hear her speak, just apply it to her and you'll get what I mean. Have a listen to this.
You've learned by living it in these past few years is that democracy needs the trust of the people.
That's right.
That the system of democracy at its heart is the idea that the people get to decide how we are governed. And if we no longer believe that our will is effectuated through the system, if bad actors tell us falsely that every election is stolen and that the only way an election is trustworthy is if they come out on top of it, then something, it tells you something not just about that person or that moment. it maybe wounds us as a democracy in a way that is hard to repair. What do you think about how we get better after the wounds that have been inflicted on us through this process?
Well, I think, the truth matters. I think having these cases be brought in such professional manners, we'll see how they unfold. Obviously, the trials, if there are trials, are going to be critically important. But the article you mentioned that I published about the weaponization of loneliness really does, in my view, point to the larger cultural concerns, because the lack of trust, the divisiveness, the undermining of faith in ourselves, in each other, respect for our institutions, the rule of law, all of that has been deliberately inculcated within our body politic. There were trends before. I mean, we have seen how people have become more isolated, less community-oriented, less civically minded. Then we see how social media and technology has certainly accelerated a lot of those trends. But the deliberate effort to divide Americans, to lie to Americans about what was going on literally in front of their own eyes, what happened on January 6th, don't believe what you saw, believe what I tell you. Those are all the hallmarks of authoritarian, dictatorial kinds of leaders.
It's unbelievable. It is. She starts off with the truth matters. Then she talks about election interference, and Jan 6, we've seen with our own eyes the footage of the undercover officers lifting the ropes, letting people in and showing them around Congress. We've seen with our own eyes the so-called Jan 6 shaman who was, subsequently made kind of the face of that so-called insurrection. We've seen with our own eyes police officers showing him with courtesy, walking him in and then saying, right, time to go, folks, as if they're tour guides. Right? We've seen this with our own eyes, and she's saying they want you to believe what you're told rather than what you see with your own eyes. They have the audacity to complain about people that rig elections while they publish articles such as the Time magazine article that we know was published. Look at that. That's the headline, the secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. In that article, and you can look it up for yourselves, just Google the title in Time magazine, you'll see it there, is this quote, which I'm going to remind everybody. Now, I'm going to read it for you. That's why the participants want the secret history of the 2020 election told. Even though it sounds like a paranoid fever dream, a well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies, working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. They were not rigging the election, they were fortifying it. They were not rigging it, they were fortifying it. What on earth does that mean? And it continues, and they believe the public needs to understand the system's fragility in order to ensure that democracy in America endures. So on the one hand, they confess to doing exactly what she's saying that Trump is guilty of, while claiming that they're the ones in the right, because this is the point. Globalists work through the principle of inversion. Everything they accuse others of is what they are doing themselves, and what they're doing is gaslighting you, and they're hoping that you're too traumatized in the fight or flight mode to understand what's going on. And if you're traumatized in fight or flight, either you're too scared and therefore you bury your head in the sand, that's the flight mode, or the fight mode, you become so angry that you become radicalized so that they can call you extremists, which we know they've also started to do. Trump voters, MAGA voters, extremists, Biden gave that speech making the same point. So, in fact, I think I even have something which, if I can find it, which is reminiscent of the point there when Biden gave the speech, but I'll pull it up if I can find it. But either way, we've seen enough now to understand that that's how they operate. So she spoke there about election interference. Let's not forget, it is unbelievable what has already come out. Spies who lie, as the New York Post headline there shows. 51 intelligence experts refuse to apologize for discrediting the true Hunter Biden election story. Meanwhile, they're claiming that the other side is the one that interfered in elections. This is the image of all of those so-called intelligence officials who waded in, stating that the Hunter Biden laptop was a Russian disinformation operation. Now the man is facing charges and trial, and the whole thing, his plea deal's fallen through. The whole thing is going to blow up. His former best friend, Devon Archer, is on the record saying that this all happened and that the big man, in other words, President Biden, was involved, and the bribery with Burisma and Ukraine, it's all going to come out. And Hillary Clinton still has the audacity to go on television pretending that the other side is guilty of all of this. The principle of inversion. It's satanic. It is unbelievable how they gaslight the public into believing that the exact opposite is true. They're hoping that either you fall for it because of the fight or flight mode, that you're so scared of their sheer power that through trauma, you just believe it, bury your head in the sand and carry on, or you get so angry that you become a far-right Nazi or a jihadist terrorist. That's what they want you to do, so that then they can use all the power and machinery of the state to go after you while increasing the power of the security state, and while pointing at you and broadcasting your error and saying to the rest of the world, see, these are the only mad people that oppose us, which is why it's so important to stay rational and grounded in our critique of these people. So this is something which I think it's incredibly important to understand, the gaslighting. And before I throw it back to you, Usman, and then after that, we're going to talk about Linda Yaccarino, Elon Musk's WEF Handmaiden. But before we do, our viewers will remember that last week's live stream was about this, and we presented what the MAGA camp is saying about these charges and what they think is going to happen, without saying, look, this is definitely what's going to happen. I want to re-emphasize this point. We were analyzing their view and joining the dots for you about what the MAGA camp believes. Since then, the analysis we presented, in particular, we played a clip of Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes that was on Britain's GB News talking about the executive order that President Trump was alleged to have put in place before he stood down as president, or stood down, because that argument states that he's still commander-in-chief. If you want to review that argument, go to last week's episode, have a watch of it. But in the meanwhile, what I want to play for you is that since streaming that episode from last week, none other than Steve Bannon went on GB News and verified the same point. In other words, what we were saying was their view was also then adopted by Steve Bannon as their view. So it does look quite certainly to be the case that this is the MAGA camp view, that they are in, what they say they're doing is that this entire thing is one huge sting operation to allow the criminals to incriminate themselves in full view of everybody, i.e. what we've just shown you, that we can all see what's going on now. And that's the view of the MAGA camp, that they're doing this so that you can all see what's going on. Before I show you Bannon's recent intervention on this, I'm just going to play again what Donald Trump said about a pause that's going to last for 4 years, just to tie this all together again for you. The MAGA camp is saying that these 4 years are a pause done deliberately as a sting operation so that globalist criminals incriminate themselves, and that this was the only way they could do it without A, a civil war, or B, a military coup. It had to come from the people, but the people needed to see it for themselves, you know, such as this kind of show and this introduction. So explaining like how we don't believe these liars anymore. So here's Donald Trump's clip on the pause. I'll go to Steve Bannon's analysis for what's going on.
One of the beautiful things of the pause, if there is such a thing as a beautiful thing, but one of the important factors of the pause is that we see how bad they've done. So we will be able to do it properly, and it will be much easier. Everybody will agree with us because everybody sees what a bad job has been done during this 2-year period, and it will be a 4-year period. Everybody sees that. It will be much easier for us to do what has to be done.
Now, the question is, for those of you who are still in some form of doubt, what could he possibly have meant by it will be a 4-year period, calling it a pause? So this is the point that the MAGA camp are making, that this was all deliberate. He signed an executive order, which we showed for you last week. And in that executive order, he made contingencies for a foreign occupation of the domestic United States. In this instance, that foreign occupation would be the globalists led by the WEF and Klaus Schwab, who are non-Americans, occupying the United States through a stolen election, which, by the way, Time magazine, again, just to substantiate the theory, because I do think it has legs. I'm not saying that we on Warrior Creed are saying this is definitely what's going to happen. I'm saying there's obviously evidence for it, which is what we're showing you, the evidence for it. Time magazine has pretty much admitted that they stole the election by calling it a fortified election. So if this was a sting operation in a 4-year pause to allow them to incriminate themselves, then that's what the MAGA camp is saying is going on. And Steve Bannon, after last week's clip we played showing Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes pretty much explaining this theory, Steve Bannon then went on GB News, in this case on Dan Wootton's show, who's also been recently come under heavy fire for some of his own behavior. But let's ignore that because we're focusing on the content of what Bannon said. Have a listen to this.
Right now, even as we speak, the magistrate judge is going through the process right now in the courtroom and going through the charges. I think you're seeing here the law of unintended consequences. We welcome this day. We welcome the full throwdown of the administrative and deep state coming after President Trump and the Trump movement, the populist nationalist movement that is ascendant in our country. And I got to tell you, if they had anything, they would have charged him with sedition or with insurrection. They didn't. They have these 4 kind of bizarre charges. They have to do backflips. But here's the great news, and for your audience, we have been looking for a venue to fully adjudicate the stealing of the election in 2020, and they've given it to us. 2 things are going to happen in this trial. We get to fully adjudicate the 2020 election because they made it, everything they've done is contingent upon him willingly and knowingly believe that he didn't win the election. We can show that he did win the election and that he believed it. In addition, the whole issue about January 6th and what we call the Fedsurrection. A tape just got put up today by Raheem Kassam on his site, Tucker Carlson's interview with the chief of Capitol Hill Police that the Murdochs and Fox News suppressed just came out, where the chief of police is saying, hey, this is a cover-up. This was a quasi-government operation, and we intend to adjudicate that in this trial. So we welcome this. The MAGA movement welcomes this. We're going to fight this, and it also is going to help initiate the impeachment inquiry, which I think you'll see in the next 2 weeks. The formal impeachment inquiry on Joe Biden will commence.
Donald Trump Jr. Has said that this charade has turned the US into a banana republic. Obviously, Steve, there'll be lots of folk in the media saying, well, you can't prove it. Trump can't prove it. So how is he going to fight this in the trial?
We can prove it. That's the whole thing. Remember, we haven't had a venue. When you talk about, 96 cases, they never actually let us show the evidence. Here, we're going to show the evidence because it's central to their case. 2 things are central to their case, and this is where Jack Smith, I think, screwed up the other day when he announced this. He made a big deal about the violence that went on January 6th. That brings January 6th, the actual what happened on January 6th, and quite frankly, why Nancy Pelosi and these people turned down any type of security. That brings that into the case. We will fully adjudicate that. In addition, they made the predicate of this that Trump knew he lost and pressed on with this, with the exact opposite. He knew he won. We will be able to bring in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan and Georgia, Arizona, and maybe throw in Nevada for good measure. But this is going to be, we're going to put before the American people and the world the facts of the 2020 and show the world the illegitimate regime of Joe Biden simultaneously when we're impeaching him for selling out our nation, for high treason, for selling out our nation for money to the Chinese Communist Party.
Now, one thing I can say to you, just as an objective observer, is it is true that everything on Jan 6 has been documented and caught on camera. So when Jack Smith, the person who's responsible for indicting Trump in these various cases, when he says, Trump and the other MAGA supporters were behind an insurrection and brings it into the indictment, as Bannon just said there, that makes it relevant in the case of in the court of law to have people subpoenaed and to present the evidence because you have to be able to defend yourself. Now, what are they going to say when that CCTV footage is shown of undercover officers, of police officers, the Capitol police officers, asking their colleagues which one of them are undercover and them saying you identify the undercover officers with their wristbands, or the CCTV footage of them lifting the ropes? All of this enters as evidence. When they say we have it all, one thing you shouldn't doubt is over the course of the last 3 years, We have seen what they mean by "we have it all," which is why headlines like this started to come out, because everything that was alleged had to be retreated from. So when they say "we have it all," everything that they say is the opposite of the truth. If we can see that now, those of us who are following it just in the press, imagine what you have in terms of evidence you can present in the court of law. So what happens in a typical sting operation is you use what people are doing by extending them a hand of help. You use what they're doing against themselves because they're incriminating themselves. So this is the idea. This is what the MAGA camp are saying is happening. And it's why I think Hillary Clinton's premature celebrations on Maddow that you just saw there are precisely that. They are incredibly premature. They are laughing now. But the point is, you know, if anything, if the last 3 years is anything to go by, and all of this stuff has come out, all of this now has come out. If anything, if you learn anything from that track record, this last one remaining, which is US election integrity, I mean, it's highly, highly likely that this whole thing's going to blow up in these indictments. And the globalists are going to have more than just egg on their faces. And Hillary Clinton won't be laughing for long. Usman.
Okay, first point, I think, first term that we should discuss that Hillary Clinton said, which is a very important point, is weaponization of loneliness.
Yeah.
You look at all the terms when she's talking to the viewer, she's using trigger terms that are the viewer that's watching the legacy media is they're taking their news from something that represents the status quo. Yeah, and that's not to condone or even back the alternative media sources from that perspective, even though that's not putting us down. We're saying that the difference with us is we're come from a certain point of research. But if you look at this from a completely objective viewpoint, you've got two bipolar viewpoints that are making propositions. Yeah. Making very definite propositions. So from Hillary Clinton's perspective, she's trying to say, look, if you're with the crazies or you even got pulled in by the crazies, which she's pointing at Trump's side and saying, look, these guys are extremists. They've gone against the status quo viewpoint. And what's now happening is we're now getting back to a state of normality. Yeah, so so what she does is she represents a level of normality and a level of morality as well from that perspective, which is tied in with the neoliberal perspective, as well as we know from the globalist point of view. Now, then we get on to Mr. Bannon, who used nationalist populist,
right-wing nationalist populist,
right-wing nationalist populist, and which, from another perspective, would have alarm bells ringing. Yeah, once again, the point that he's used then goes into this. Once again, goes into this perspective of an us and them bipolar argument. Now, the problem is here, Maajid, we've got to be careful of, when we're talking about the inverted argument, we've almost got the inverted argument on both sides, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like you've got both sides inverting each other's argument, but also the other issue with this being that, we know that from the Clinton perspective, they've very much been, their whole methodology has been a methodology of going in and using people's insecurities against them. Hence this muscular neoliberalism with the whole transgender, pushing of the transgender movement, pushing of the my body, my right perspective, which is, we're not against freedom, but where they've been taking it to, where it's very much from an individualistic perspective. Now, if you look at it On Trump's side, on the other side, he's coming in with a what I'd call almost a pseudo collective perspective, because it's talking about nationalism, but once again, that the nationalism is based on. Remember, we talked about the Judeo-Christian alliance perspective from that point of view. So when we're talking about the middle ground with this, the middle ground discussion, which is actually about the human factor, needs to be taken into account. Does that make sense, Maajid? So what I'm saying is that, yeah, when people are analysing this, try and stay in the middle and try and stay critical, and that's the difficult perspective with this, because yes, when it gets to court, we've got one side that's done one side that's exposing the other side, but also the agendas that are behind both methodologies are, yes, where we sit ourselves is in the middle, rather than sitting with either side on, okay, this is right or that's right, because there's very definite propositions that have been made there, such as right-wing populist nationalists that should ring alarm bells, and then with the Wicked Witch of the West, her point about the weaponization of loneliness is actually something that her administration's been also guilty of, but they're guilty of at a different level, which is using the fourth industrial revolution and media to literally corrupt the human mindset and get rid of the things that even made America, or human beings, such as the idea of what gender is. Do you see what I mean? So as we're moving forward, yeah, I mean, I know if someone doesn't understand the way I'm speaking right now, it's because we'd expect. I'm talking from the level that we've had viewers that have kept up with us building the foundations of what we're talking about here. What I'm explaining right now is the fact that someone viewing this will be very aware previously of where the Trump administration was criticized. Yeah. And we're not condoning any of that. We're not saying the Trump administration was correct in what it was doing. In fact, we were the loudest in criticizing the dehumanization of Muslims and Muslims being made the other, and the dehumanization of immigrants. We were the first ones.
That's all on record.
Yeah, and that's all on record. So let me underline that point before getting over to this other point, which is, we're not coming from the point of view that better the devil you know. But what we're saying is that Trump's administration, if they were doing what they were doing in a more obvious way, what we've had with the whole Obama, Biden, Clinton movement, is this idea of freedom and liberalism, which isn't really freedom and liberalism. It's actually a hyper consumerism where you're taught, or they try to teach you what you want. Remember, you're taught what you want. Yep. And then they sell it to you afterwards. Hence, we've never, for centuries, human beings have been fine with the boundaries that they've had within language to fulfill their roles to get to an end point. And now all of a sudden the semantics of what gender are being changed and put into the public. The idea of what it is, the idea of your own well-being is something that you're now handing over to a higher authority. Remember, from this perspective, authoritarianism isn't obvious. Authoritarianism comes in and puts the boot down on that first generation that rebels against it. But what happens is intelligent authoritarianism comes in and makes you think you want the boot on your neck, makes you think that it's massaging the knot out of your neck, when really it's choking you out. And this is the thing that we've got here, which is we're dealing with systems that are putting propositions out there that are using this red and blue methodology, which is quite interesting, because if you design and so while I've been sitting there putting designs together and I go in and have to go in with the shading, when you go in and you see the red and the blue, which are both on the same side, by the way, Maajid, but they're both extremes. They're both extremes. So when you look at the color spectrum, red and blue are both extremes within that color spectrum. And what we've got within this is we've got extremes that have been pitched to us. One extreme is an extreme that is non-religion, non-binary, some amorphous creature that is a blob. Do you see what I mean? That which doesn't really have a role. And then on the other side, you've got very definite idea of what it is to be a human being, which would be the Judeo-Christian nationalist, which also has the other. Remember, Maajid,
I'm calling that conservative ink.
Yeah, conservative ink. Yeah, and both of those have very cleverly created two bipolar strands, which is funny. Remember, because we talked about the sympathetic system, fight or flight. Yeah. You can go and get the big hug of the neoliberals, or you can go to the conservatives and have the fight.
And have the vengeance.
And have your vengeance. But both of those sit within the sympathetic system. And anyone who knows anything knows that the sympathetic system is supposed to only kick in when everything else has been tried. Yeah, the sympathetic system is, you've called for security now. Do you see what I mean? And that's the difference with this. And the reason I'm making these points is because there's the void that we find right now is a void of critical thinking and what's actually called reasonable, reasonable. Yeah, because what we're talking about here is a concept of reason, Maajid. Yeah, because remember, we're only, and if someone's looking at this going, wait a minute, this guy's made it all too complicated. I like the linear way we were explaining. No. Look, you fucking idiot. What I'm explaining to you is you've just listened to something that we're talking about one country here. Yes, we might be talking about one empire, but we're talking about the way that the empire is being governed. Yeah. And even if you've got these grand the grand conspiracies, so to speak, if people want to use that word, people want to use, or the hypothesis behind it, whatever hypothesis someone has on whatever's going on, what we've definitely got going on each side, and the word definite I used on purpose there, is propositions. There is nothing in the middle that actually brings you something reasonable, that brings you something that's actually collective. The reason you're being given absolutes is because your mind is very comfortable with black and white, red or blue, with extremes. And hence, you've got the legacy media on one side, and then you got what we talked about last week, Maajid, where you've got this new media that's backed up by the world's richest man that is now coming in and dismantling that legacy media. Yep. Remember, we've seen the dismantling of the legacy media has come in, dismantled the previous moral framework with the myths that were healthy, such as the Star Wars and the Back to the Futures and the whatever had some moral truth from a Western perspective in from that perspective. You had the legacy media come in and turn everything. Yeah, there's no such thing as a good guy. There's no such thing as a bad guy. There's no such thing as morality. Everything's relative. Yeah, and then what then comes in, and it's interesting, Maajid, because I got recommended First Blood, which is the book that Rambo, the first Rambo's based on. But I got that recommended to me because David Morrell, the guy who wrote it, he actually wrote it as a commentary on exactly this, and this is going back to the 70s and the 80s, what we talked about, Maajid, with the idea that in 1967 you had the Summer of Love, and then during the 70s, coming up into the 80s, you had all of this protesting against the Vietnam War, because America was at that time in the 70s in its golden age, when the meat packing job was something that everyone used to want. There used to be a waiting list for it, because you could go and buy a house on a meat packing job. Yeah. So what happened is, when people were happy, when their bellies were full, when they could take care of their kids, their circle of influence expanded from themselves outwards, and they were looking and they were going, why are we doing this internationally? Yeah. So what then happens is that was also blamed on a level of what? Liberalism. Yeah, there's how these people have become too liberal. They've become too interested. Now, not to get that confused, but what you have to remember, that at that time they were able to point to 1967, the Summer of Love, the Beatles bringing in the teachings of Crawley and Aleister Crawley and free love, and once again everyone's worshipping the devil, and very interesting, very similar to what we've got now. Yeah. And then what happens when Reagan comes in? You have the conservatism, you have the othering once again, and it's interesting because in First Blood, you've got Rambo who's turning up from the Vietnam War, and this guy's outwardly dressed like a hippie, but he's the one who's fought for the country. But the town that he turns up in, the policeman that's there is also a Korean War veteran who's also decorated. But what he wants is, he wants to stay within the old community collective type of setup, maybe the conservatism. And what Rambo is representing to him falsely, because he's only seen Rambo from the outside.
Yeah, he starts off by calling him a hippie, doesn't he?
Yeah, starts off by calling him a hippie.
Yeah.
But so I'm only in the middle of it right now. But the way it's playing out is that you've got these guys that are misinterpreting each other. They're actually misinterpreting each other, because what you've got here is that you've got Rambo. John Rambo is expecting the policeman to see him for who he is, but outwardly the policeman can only see what's relative to him. Yeah, see what he's seeing, but really he's got a war hero in front of him. He's got someone who has actually got a medal that's higher than the medal that he's got. Yep. So this Korean War hero's medal is the second highest. Yeah. Now the point I'm making with this is talking about, once again, the bipolar reaction. Yeah. And anyone who wants to study mental illness, they're going to find that bipolar syndrome is actually one of the biggest ailments in modern society right now. Once again, going back to this left hemisphere directed focus, fight or flight, sympathetic state. Yep. Now, this might sound complicated to people, but when you remember, as we said, if you don't want to drink the coffee, I'm pretty sure there's a can of decaffeinated Coke somewhere that you can go pick up. Maybe you got some comedian that's breaking down modern events for you. Go and watch that podcast. Yeah.
Again, we're relying on the fact that we've got a regular bunch of people returning to this live stream, understanding the context of what's being stated here in a way that makes sense, because frankly, we do return to these themes every week when we respond to current events to remind everybody. It's why I inserted it in my monologue, that they want the fight or flight response. And you're breaking that down here.
Yeah, and the thing with this is, Marjorie, this is something that if they don't understand this, the point that we made before, that when Reagan comes in and shuts down the trade unions, and that's when that meatpacking factory can no longer supply you with a job that's going to be able to pay, to fully pay off your house. Because what we get is we get this thing where the interest rates go up, and like what we find ourselves in internationally right now, where the upper tier, remember, even during COVID, the rich got richer, exponentially richer, and the poor got exponentially poorer. Yep. Now, what we've got once again with this is a distraction. Yeah, we talked about Elon Musk versus Mark Zuckerberg as the grand main event. But if people understand, they're already sitting in the Colosseum right now.
Yeah.
They're already sitting, like what you're watching right now is a gladiatorial event. This is just groups against each other. But the problem is, this takes a level of thinking that where you can sit back and understand that this isn't your little buzzing moment, but they don't understand as well is that the way they're being entertained is within that fight or flight, that sympathetic system. That's why it's a high or a low. It's never a middle. Yeah, the middle's where you can stay. It's a high or a low. Yeah, you're in a state where you're surviving on chocolate bars, meaning as soon as you get that sugar dip, you go and have a chocolate bar, but guess what? The next sugar dip is coming. There's no consistency of value, and hence what you get with this is, have you noticed this expansion, Maajid, of like this? We've had general knowledge that we talked about before, where within the schooling system, everyone thinks they've got a general knowledge of everything, and that problem's got worse with the fourth industrial revolution and everyone Googling everything. Yeah. You've got that there. So what ends up happening then is you now empower everyone. So weaponization of loneliness. I haven't stepped away from what the Wicked Witch of the West was talking about. Weaponization of loneliness is this thing where, okay, you've got this thing where everyone is in this state where you can go and you can inform yourself from this general knowledge perspective. And when you inform yourself, that they know the places where you're going to inform yourself, and the information you get is what makes everything relative, because everyone now thinks they've all got their special mix of information that makes them unique. But they don't understand is you're all part of, no, this is an intro, you're all part of the same church. And I'm not talking about religion here, because religion is the binding ideology. The binding ideology here, don't get caught in the theatre play of your mosques, your churches, your synagogues and your temples. Your binding ideology here is the fourth industrial revolution, and where you all go for your information. And that information makes you think in a certain way. And because you're all in a state, you're all in that sympathetic state, what can now happen is I know which buttons to push. Remember, we used to talk about this during our counterterrorism days, Maajid, where remember the conversation was, well, how come if I push this button over here, and remember, we're not backing or disregarding anything. If I push this button over here for Israel and Palestine, everyone jumps. Yeah. But if I push this button over here for the Uyghurs, wait a minute, that button doesn't work. Can someone come and check this button?
Yeah.
How come there's no alarm on this button? Yeah. And we're wondering, we go, okay, well, surely our human concern needs
It's
to be
human concern.
Yeah, concern needs to be universal. Needs to be
Human.
Yeah. But the problem with this is, Maajid, there isn't human concern. It's red or blue.
Yeah.
It's red or blue. And the great thing about red or blue is that you're not stuck in your loneliness. But you are stuck in your loneliness because guess what? You've been taught to go and get your relative information from the fourth industrial, from your little window of the priesthood of Google. You'll go and Google whatever information. You'll be on Twitter, and then most people nowadays have artificially pleasured themselves so much that they're in an object perspective rather than a human perspective in any of their relationships anyway. And this is why it's very interesting. This is why, what we're talking about here actually goes beyond maybe what your favorite comedian is referencing on any one of his shows, where they're talking about what ethnicity they are and reinventing themselves instead of talking about what group they actually belong to try and put their political viewpoint across, or you've got some comedian up there who's sticking neon signs behind their podcast to try and rip someone else off. And instead look, no, this is real information, because, and I'm sorry if it sounds complicated because you're a fucking idiot and this is going over your head, and I don't know you, so I'm not bothered. Even if I did know you, it wouldn't matter anyway. But the point being that because in order to problem solve, when you problem solve, you realize problems are bespoke thing. Every problem you look at isn't the same. If we go into a town, Maajid, and we're looking at the demographic of the town, it doesn't matter if you've got the same percentage layout as another town. The problems in that town we deal with from a bespoke perspective. We're like tailors. We come in, we measure it. And this is what we're talking about right now. We're measuring the issue, and we're saying, okay, when it gets to court and we've got both sides speaking now, understand that, if you've got the security services that are against, so you've got one alphabet group that is against another alphabet group and remember, we've been there in the US where we've seen alphabet groups working in the UK without UK government permission and without the permission of the other group, which actually had authorization to work internationally. So all of this, we're used to this craziness because of the frontline counterterrorism work that's been done. And this is what people don't understand, because they think that...
Hence why we're able to see a lot of this coming.
Exactly. But the point is with this, that what we're trying to put across to everyone here is that the inversion methodology that Maajid has just described to you, he isn't describing it to you to be theatrical. We're not describing it to you to be niche. We're describing it to you because red and blue. But guys, what's the middle color spectrum of this? What actually needs to be done? If we're in a world where the World Economic Forum is recognizing, remember Klaus Schwab said it himself, said fourth industrial revolution. Now, the point that he's making there is very big, because each revolution, so the Neolithic period, the first Stone Age was the first recorded revolution. Anyone who's educated properly in logic and thinking starts looking at this, and this is where your favorite Maajid, Noah Harari.
Yuval.
What's that?
Yuval Noah Harari.
Yuval Noah Harari.
Yeah.
This is the difference with the logic. When he breaks it down, even though he's breaking it down from his perspective. Yep. The point is, there's a recognition there. There's a recognition of the periods. Yeah. And the period we find ourselves in now with this fourth industrial revolution, which Klaus Schwab is putting across, is actually saying, look, the concept of the nation state is something that doesn't exist anymore. Yep. And that's why when we're seeing this red and blue that can seem so important, because it can look like, have I minimized this? Am I recognizing how important it is? Wait a minute. Marge has just explained this, and his friends on there explaining he's minimizing this. He's minimized it back down to the psychological thing, and it's not making sense. No, it is making sense, because the reason it's making sense is because what we're seeing here is we're seeing a nation state theater play, guys. Yeah. What we said last week is we've made mention of this all the way for the last year and a half that Warrior Creed's been running. The nation state, what we've recognized with the UK is, if you come to the UK, the steel mile of the city of London, around which you see layers of gentrification. Yep, you see layers of gentrification that come outwards until, from the south of England, if you go to the north of England, I mean, I don't know if you've been far north, Maajid. I mean, there's towns up there. Yeah, when I went to pick up Rocky as a puppy, I went to Grimsby, Maajid. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever. I dare say there's places in the third world that aren't as bad as Grimsby. It's absolutely atrocious. I was shocked to see a place like that in the UK. But there's whole towns that are empty when you go north. Yeah. But the point I'm making with that is you very quickly get to see the centers of wealth, and you get to see that on a micro and macro level, even within your own nation. So when we're talking about this from an ideological perspective, what you have to understand is, when you start seeing all of these things, you have to start understanding that ideologically and why it's getting people to move in a certain way and not recognize the fact that you have hubs of wealth. Why is it that everyone's being taught, even with this alternate get you out of the matrix nonsense, even with this get you out of the matrix nonsense.
I think that's growing tired, by the way. Just my observations. People are becoming tired with some of that rhetoric and some of the voices espousing that rhetoric.
But what they're not. But this is the real get you out.
Yeah, that's what it's what last week's show. Remember when we started losing signal? That was the point I was making. That look, this show, guys, just in case you're in any doubt and you're just joining us for the first time, you're not going to hear us glorifying materialism as two men that are very comfortable with our state. We're not going to be talking about women, wine, money, how to basically make as much money as possible, attract as many women as possible, and live a certain lifestyle. That's not what this is about. Yep. And so getting out of the world is a stage, kind of, the theater play that Usman's talking about. This conversation on Warrior Creed isn't to say the way you get out of it is make as much money as possible, become famous, have all the women around you, and just enjoy your hedonistic materialism. That's not the solution to the problem here. Because go back to the extreme reactions that are being sought. Go back to the fight or flight. So if that is the fight version of the burying your head in the sand, that is by the way, the reaction to trauma is always that. If you attacked me, if you attacked Usman, fight or flight's going to kick in. One or two things is going to happen when you attack someone. Either they're scared and they're going to run, or they're going to turn into an absolute beast and pulverize you. That is an instinct response. What they're counting for on a macro level is one of those two, because you are either going to bury your head in the sand like a lemming and hope this all goes away, or what they want is you turn into a fanatic that basically starts planning, direct action to destroy, and that makes it easy to discredit you. So it's the same point here. Materialism as a solution, rampant, patriarchal, misogynist, male materialism as a worthy pursuit is also a extreme response that's being presented as a solution to this problem by people that I'd argue are relatively insecure about their masculinity.
And the reason that's done, Mods, is because if I want to achieve something, I've got to find, regardless of the fact that I want to achieve it, if someone else has achieved it, I then, even at a subconscious level, admire that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the problem is, if you've got, you might have this escape the matrix, go get rich thing and say, look, it's because I'm going against the system. No, you're not, because what you're trying to achieve is exactly what the bad guy, you're doing what the bad guys achieve. So what you're trying to do is you are being the bad guy. The idea of going and acting selflessly, the concept here of being like Moses in the court of Pharaoh, where he goes there and he goes to the one that considered, remember, Pharaoh considered himself God. Yeah, and the problem here is that if you getting out of the matrix is no, don't worship that person, worship yourself. And the worship of the self even goes on to this level of me and my God.
Yep. Yeah.
And rather than everything is interconnected, you need the flower, you need the bee, you need the pollen to get the honey. And this isn't us being hippie. Takes us back to the Rambo point. This isn't us being hippie. This is us being realistic, because this is actually the other side of what the WEF is talking about. This is actually the other side. This is where we're talking about a world where there is enough water, there is enough food, where we haven't got these problems. But instead, we've got a world right now where Niger is paying France taxes from the colonial days. We've got why was Afghanistan invaded, and we'll still there'll be another plot being hatched right now because they've got lithium and everything else under the ground over there. Do you see? And why is it that the countries that are mineral rich are the ones that are starving, and the countries on the other side, which, by the way, it's funny, isn't it? Because when we get into this escape the matrix, then the new conservatism thought process, that's kind of like, well, this is just evolution, and we're the human beings that invaded them. And
that's implicit within the argument. You must have heard it. Yeah, it's like you're a loser if you're not rich, and basically you're half a man if you're not rich.
And stop coming out.
You know what my point to those people are? Yeah, here's something to consider. Right, we know, right, that the Prophet Muhammad, for example, we take that as the uswatun hasana, the best example for all of us, that we are then as those of us who try and adhere to that code, right? It's a warrior creed. We'll then try and lead by example for others as uswat and hasana, to show people this is how to be by example. That example doesn't once emphasize become rich, basically become hedonistic, materialistic. So you look at the life of an illiterate man who lived in the desert, who loved to eat dates. And you're telling us that the way to escape the matrix is to have Bugattis and Ferraris. I mean, come on, man. Seriously. Anyway, listen, I wanted to move to the next conversation because we're already, I don't know if you realize it, 1 hour, 10 minutes.
Oh, God, yeah.
So let's get to talking about materialism. The world's richest man appointed a director of the WEF, Linda Yaccarin, as you all know by now, as his CEO to run the platform formerly known as Twitter. What we're going to speak to you next is based off this article on majidnawaz.substack.com, and that is on Radical Media there. You can see blue check is the new blue hair. Two-faced Elon Musk's WEF handmaiden Linda Yaccarino promises to censor what she said, direct quote, lawful but awful content on Twitter. So we're going to break this down for everybody because, again, back to Conservative Inc. People have erected golden calves as idols. Back to the story of Moses. We know, if those of you don't know the story, all it took was for Musa alayhi salam, for Moses to retreat a while to the mountain, and the people that had followed him, some of them, despite the protestations of his brother Harun or Aaron, some of them, alayhi salam, some of them decided to worship the next new shiny object, and that was the golden calf. It came along, it sparkled and glittered and glamored. Again, back to the materialism, right? There are so many deep moral lessons in these stories. And that golden calf was brought, and in the absence of Musa alayhi salam, they started worshipping this golden calf, much to his anger when he returned. And the reaction, if you look at the reaction and the anger when he returned to see that, is because Musa alayhi salam, understood exactly what was at stake if in his absence, by a matter of days, the next new shiny object is worshipped. So the savior concept here, that something is going to come along to save us, and it has to be this world's richest man, is something we have to be incredibly careful of. So let's step back a second and understand what we're talking of here, because it wasn't enough for people that are in Conservative Inc., right? Remember, we've just discussed that, yeah? So remember, you're being led up the garden path by a bunch of Pied Pipers. There's not just one Pied Piper. So if you're being led up the garden path by Conservative Inc., you should question with your critical faculties that your savior is the exact opposite of what he's currently claiming. We got a man who originally voted for Biden while now claiming to be representing everything you stand for. So if that wasn't enough to make you stop and question what's going on here, then I'll show you this. This is the same man, remember, who sent the most advanced space weapons program to Ukraine on behalf of the Pentagon to support Zelensky. So, fine, he subsequently changed his view many months after we appeared, for example, on Rogan in Jan 2022, criticizing the Ukraine war. That guy was still sending the most advanced space weapons program to Zelensky, to warmonger in Ukraine. But that wasn't enough to make people stop believing that this golden calf shines and glitters and sparkles and that they should prostrate to it. Well, if that wasn't enough, what about the fact that he's already on record telling you that he wants to implant microchips in your brain and gain FDA approval for the process in order to augment humanity? Now, the point is that, again, just apply your critical faculties. The FDA, since when is applying to the FDA for approval something that is elicits a trustworthy response? Remember the COVID mandates. Just take a look at this meme and remember who we're talking about here. Because when Bill Gates comes along and says, let's make more vaccines, everybody cries and says, no, you want to put microchips in our bodies. Elon Musk comes along and says, I want to microchip your brain. And everyone's like, yeah, thumbs up. Our savior is speaking the truth. Blatant contradictions in your stance reveal everything Usman has just said, that you're basically your fight or flight mode has dampened your rational faculties, and because you're either going to bury your heads in the sand or try and fight this thing, you're hoping you can have a champion to fight it for you. And I'd argue that's actually the burying the head in the sand response anyway. But point being that if you look at what has been played out, I'm going to give another example. This is all we're going to get to what Linda Yaccarino has just said. This is all to lay the context for it, because we're showing you that you're being hoodwinked on every side, and that the only way forward through this, people say, oh, but Usman Maajid, this is a black pill, you're depressing us all. No, we're not, because we're saying there is a way through this, and that is, do not be manipulated. Remember that if you remain grounded and connected, as Usman's talked about, with your everything around you, people don't go backwards from that. When you're grounded and connected and you have a horizontal connection with your spirituality and a vertical, vertical with your spirituality, horizontal with everybody else, and you're connected to everything in a full, let's call it a sphere, right? It's difficult to then become isolated or disconnected again, because once you taste that honey, you can never retreat from it. But don't take take as much as you want. We're not going to force feed it to you. Take a little drop of the honey and you'll like it. You'll come back for more. But once you're there, you're never going to want to leave that jar of, say, sidr honey. It's going to be absolutely delicious. So now, a point being is that's what we're trying to show you. So already we've shown you some of the background to what's going on. Then, of course, remember, it was the same Musk that decided that Substack was too competitive for him. So he needed to try and challenge that too, right? So this is from Substack saying that they were investigating reports that Twitter went to war against Substack. They never recovered from it. You can still not use Substack on Twitter. He never retreated from that. So what we've just shown you is Musk was somebody that voted for Biden, i.e. globalism, supported the Ukraine war, i.e. globalism, wants to chip your body, i.e. technocratic globalism, and wants to ruin all other competition that challenges his technocratic power, globalism. And yet you're still cheering for this technocrat. So if that wasn't enough, what he then does next is appoint somebody as his CEO who is a clear and blatant director of the World Economic Forum. That's from her own LinkedIn page. It's there on her own LinkedIn page that she's a director of the WEF. And that's still not enough for you to believe that the man is Pied Piper. And he then tells you that he's finding all of this absolutely hilarious. From May the 12th, the most entertaining outcome is the most likely. And as you see, my response to that, that's something that Caligula would have said. Caligula was that totally debauched Roman emperor who was absolutely psychopathic and enjoyed torturing and harming people for entertainment. The most entertainment outcome was most likely. That tweet was about appointing a WEF handmaiden, Linda Yaccarino, as his CEO. He is laughing at you and people are still cheering him on. The same Linda Yaccarino who was pro-vaccine mandates. You can see there from a past tweet during the COVID era. The Ad Council is working to inform Americans on why we must embrace an FDA-approved COVID vaccine and how to go about it. We're almost there. Let's cross the finish line. So you got somebody's admitted to working with propaganda, the ads campaign, on behalf of the WEF to enforce vaccines on you, and you're all cheering the man who appointed her as the CEO of the world's most powerful communications platform. Now, all of this is to lead to what we're discussing now. Linda Yaccarino just this week gave a speech in which she made it, if it wasn't already clear enough for you all, she made it absolutely clear that their view on Twitter, for example, is to pursue a policy of freedom of speech, not freedom of reach. I'm going to play the video. I will quickly then after that flash up the transcripts of the video for those of you that like reading and not listening, and you can then pause it on those screens and read it for yourselves. But here's the interview, first of all, in which she pretty much admits that Twitter, the platform formerly known as, is pursuing a policy of censorship against people that they deem have awful views. And clearly, what you've just heard here on Warrior Creed is deemed awful, because we have no doubt, and you can all see it for yourselves, an account such as mine with over 500,000 followers has been frozen there since Rogan over a year ago, and each tweet with 500,000 followers is getting 12 retweets. It's obvious to everybody that understands what's going on. When they say we're going to tolerate lawful but awful views, but they have freedom of speech and not freedom of reach, what they want you to do is they want you to be whistling into the wind, so that you can at least still blow oxygen out of your mouth, but nobody's going to hear it because you're whistling into the wind. Have a listen to what she's just admitted herself in another corporatist media interview.
They take it down. And that reducing that hateful content from being seen is one of the best examples how X is committed to encouraging healthy behavior online. And today, I can confidently sit in front of you and say that 99.9% of all posted impressions are healthy.
How do you define healthy, though? Is porn healthy? Are conspiracy theories healthy?
You know, it goes back to my point about our success with freedom of speech, not reach. And if it is lawful, but it's awful, it's extraordinarily difficult for you to see it.
But how many millions of people follow Kanye West? Lawful, but awful. And he's allowed back on.
You know, Kanye, who hasn't rejoined the platform yet, but is planning to do so, will operate within the very specific policies that we have established, that we're clear on, that everyone who's watching this or listening on Spaces can access themselves. And we have an extraordinary team of people who are overseeing, hands on keyboards, monitoring all day, every day, to make sure that that 99.99% of impressions remain at that number. But we also have to remember what's at the core of free expression. You might not agree with what everyone is saying. We want to make it a healthy debate and discourse, but free expression at its core will really, really only survive when someone you don't agree with says something you don't agree with. And what a great place we would live in if we were able to return to a healthy, constructive discourse amongst people that we don't agree with. So
there you have it. They think we're stupid. On the one hand, they gaslight you by talking about healthy, constructive place where disagreement is allowed. On the other hand, you've got a platform that actively suppresses, and she's just told you that with her magician's twist of the tongue. Yeah, by using these rhyming phrases, they're hoping you get bamboozled and you get mesmerized by the golden calf because it shines. It's why they use these rhymes. Lawful but awful speech will not be tolerated. It will be suppressed because they have a policy of freedom of speech, not freedom of reach. That's a fancy way of saying we're going to censor things we don't like. Meanwhile, as everybody sees, Twitter is turning into a soft porn site, which is what Elon Musk finds entertaining. And so you've got views that are being suppressed and censored because they're awful. And yet at the same time, other things such as porn, you're noticing, is rising on Twitter. And my view is, of course, again, just in time for the US election primary debate. It is incredibly convenient that this is all happening. Now, I'm going to put up, as I said, the transcript because some of you like the text. So this is the transcript of the interview. You see there, reducing that hateful content from being seen is one of the best examples of how X is committed to encouraging healthy behavior. Go down to the bottom there, you see in bold, freedom of speech, not reach. It's lawful but awful, and they're going to make it extremely difficult for you to see it. And this is, of course, the second part of what she was saying, asking about Kanye West. I want to observe here at this point that even the people that they claim in public that they're suppressing, right? So even the people there, you see Kanye West is an example cited. It's important to remember that at no point ever will they even acknowledge the actual people they're suppressing, because that presents, that gives oxygen to their argument that they're being suppressed. So you won't see Musk responding to people like us on there when we say, why are we being suppressed? They will pick the example they want you to think is being suppressed, like Kanye. But what that comes with also is the baggage of Kanye's recent outbursts about the Jews, right? So if you then defend that, you're then again on the wrong side of the debate. What they won't do is pick on voices like ours, who not once have made this about the Jews, so that, because of course defending us is a lot easier and sympathizing with our voices being suppressed is a lot easier. No, even the examples of the suppressed, Nick Fuentes, Kanye, they will pick them deliberately and name them deliberately so that you're unable to defend them, so that you're again bumped into supporting the suppression. And you will notice this, not once are we acknowledged, not once is it recognized that we're being, when it's obvious, you can see it on the platform, but they won't name us as examples, and they all instead go absolutely silent. So this is being noticed. Even our colleague Raheem Kassan, who we had on this on the early days of Warrior Creed when we used to have guests, he's noticing it, and in fact even beginning to notice that his account is being suppressed, and yet people continue to pay for the privilege to the platform formerly known as Twitter. They continue to pay so that they can be suppressed. And that's what the blue check is about. That's why I'm saying it's the new blue hair. Why, guys, are you paying to be censored? It makes no, what, just for the blue check? Just for the virtue signal of having that verified badge next to you, which, you know, we used to have it. They removed it from us. And of course, their censorship of us was prevalent even prior to them removing the blue check. But why would you pay the Pied Piper to play you the tune? It is absolutely embarrassing. Now, On that phrase, freedom of speech, not freedom of reach, what I thought to conclude is to demonstrate on this episode is to show you the origins of the phrase so you understand where this is all coming from. So here is Musk stating that very clearly, freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. That's from the 18th of November 2022, right? So keep that in mind, 18th of November 2022. Here is the head of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, on April the 5th, 2022. Before that point, now this tweet was brought to my attention by this tweeter, Andrew Torber, who is the CEO of Gab. So clearly he has other interests. He's got his own social media platform. Keep that in mind. But focus on Jonathan Greenblatt's tweet from before the one I just showed you of Elon Musk. And he stated it there. This isn't hard. Freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of reach. So the phrase itself and the lobbying to have that as the platform formerly known as Twitter's official censorship policy, you can begin tracing its origins. That lobby groups that sit are kind of adjacent to government and lobby politicians for their interests, such as the ADL, is where this new censorship policy has come from. We've just shown you the head of the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt's tweet saying that's the solution prior to Elon Musk then accepting that is the solution. But if that's not enough, we're going to show you a video that Kyle, an undercover reporter, has uploaded to the platform formerly known as Twitter. So this is his tweet. I went undercover to expose the ADL for their attempts to control social media platforms like X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. Notice how casually they talk about censoring and banning you when they don't know they're on camera. And then he's got 5 clips. I'm just going to show you a couple of those clips for the sake of time, not all of them. But here it is, some of the undercover clips from the ADL, so you can understand where this policy is coming from.
Oh my God. So I am the director of development. Yeah, and I'm the community manager for Arizona.
Gotcha.
So, right, you kick people off of some of these platforms like Twitter or Facebook, and then they go to different platforms.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of this balance of like keeping some of these spaces safe, but also not having them go into this like dark place where they're just with like-minded people.
Yeah.
And so it's this really interesting balance that we kind of continue to have about like making sure they don't go down this like rabbit hole, but also they're not spewing hate and misinformation. Because you want them to be out in the open, because the more they're talking out in the open, the more you can stop incidents from happening. Like, we're not going to ban them, we're just probably not going to engage with them to the same degree. Well, one of the things we say is like everyone should have freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach.
Yeah.
And so I always think that makes so much sense, right? Like, you can say whatever you want, but once you start having the reach of a social media platform that you're impacting a lot of other people, that's when it becomes the issue.
So there you heard freedom of speech, not reach, in that undercover interview. Those of you who want the transcript of that video, it did have subs, but it wasn't showing on the clip we just put up here because it was too big for the Restream platform. But again, go to that article that I've just mentioned this segment is based on Radical Media. Pull up the headline again for you. It's this article here. If you go to that, you'll see the full transcript of those videos. Two-Face Elon Musk's WEF Handmaiden, Linda Yaccarino promises to censor lawful but awful content. That's at maajidnawaz.substack.com. I'll play one more just to demonstrate how this is done. They're using, as they've just said on this undercover camera, they're using a new AI technology to automatically filter tweets, videos, and content, and it then pings those relevant whatever search terms they put in, and then automatically represses it on the Twitter algorithm. Have a listen to this.
These sort of extremists have podcasts, but like who has the time to listen to like just them drone on and on, where like 99% of what they're saying is like about video games or something. And so there's this new software that it can actually like scan the entire podcast for like flagged words.
Wow.
And then like extract like when they talk about some like extremist activity they want to perform, and then it like extracts it out. So I thought that was really cool.
See, that's the kind of.
So there you heard it. The extremists have podcasts, and we have AI tech that seeks to filter those podcasts. Again, the transcript of all of that is on the Radical Media article I've just referenced. Now, remember, when they talk about extremists, it's no longer just us, right? Muslims, yeah? Remember, Biden went public, as this Guardian article demonstrates, and it states there, more than 11 months old, and it states, I'll read the headline, Biden warns U.S. democracy is imperiled by Trump and MAGA extremists. In a primetime address, the president further said the Republican Party was dominated, driven, and intimidated by Trump. So when they say that we want to censor extremist content, it applies to everybody that disagrees with them. And it's why it's so important to understand that what begins with Muslims, what begins with minority communities, doesn't stop there. Because the purpose of deploying these sorts of measures isn't just to starve from oxygen Muslim voices, minority voices. It's to gain totalitarian control, which is incrementally gained by first picking on the thin end of the wedge. Hence the war on terror and all of the other stuff that we've now seen through history, the invasion of Iraq, the Patriot Act, the Terrorism Act in the UK. But that's the thin end of the wedge for them. They know that if you shut down, for example, Maajid Nawaz's bank account in roughly 2010, as HSBC did in America, there isn't a global outcry. You shut down Nigel Farage's bank accounts in the UK and it becomes a national scandal, and even the globalist Rishi Sunak has to get involved. But how did we get there where they could shut down Nigel Farage, Mr. Brexit's bank account? If not for a decade earlier doing it, it's a whole bunch of people that everyone remained quiet about. That's how this works, folks. It's why we're trying to show you this. So again, to say when it works with the thin end of the wedge and they're talking about the censorship, the ADL is just there on camera telling you what they're going to do. I'm now going to, before I conclude, Usman, move it to Imran Khan to show you that's exactly what's being done there. So if you remember, a long time ago, over a year ago, and I'll show you the date there from this Radical Media article on majidnawaz.substack.com, April 13th, 2022, over a year ago, we've written, PM Imran Khan alleges regime change attempt by the Biden administration in Pakistan. You can go still to Radical Media and read that article. And of course, this tweet there dated April the 3rd, 2022, well over a year ago. Breaking, subject to Supreme Court ruling, which has subsequently happened. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan has named U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asian Affairs in the U.S. State Department, Donald Lu, as a player in the regime change conspiracy of a no-confidence motion against the Pakistani government. Well, we said this on Warrior Creed over a year ago. You can all go back to the episodes where Usman and I are talking about this. We even brought on some Pakistani commentators such as former soldier Adil Raja to discuss all this stuff. And just this week, it all came out. The Intercept published on August the 9th, 2023. You can see the headline there. Secret Pakistan cable documents the US pressure to remove Imran Khan. All will be forgiven, said a US diplomat, if the no confidence vote against Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan succeeds. So the entire thing works in this way. You suffocate the voices of those minority communities or in the developing countries first using the power of the state. Eventually it comes to you. What started with Imran Khan landed, as Biden said, we've just shown you the headline, landed on Trump voters' heads. If you can't draw a connection between those and realize what's headed your way, we can't do anything else for you. We've spent the last year or more showing you, literally opening your eyes to everything that's going on. And it's culminated in this point now where the recent news, as is reported here by arabnews.pk, you can see it. The article's headlined, Pakistani regulator bans coverage of 11 individuals, including journalists. I'll read a quote from the article. Pakistan's electronic media watchdog has directed broadcasters not to give airtime to 11 proclaimed offenders, including journalists and members of former Prime Minister Imran Khan's party. So they are deliberately banning voices, the same voices. They started with our voices, right? So have a look at, remember, LBC, they cancelled my voice from LBC. It's affected their viewer figures, as this Telegraph article shows. LBC owner now shakes up the management amid a decline in listeners. And a quote from the article, LBC's weekly listener numbers fell 2% to 2.5 million in the second quarter as audiences tuned out of the big name presenters such as Nick Ferrari and James O'Brien. But the key point here is what started with us, where they kicked us off air, will end up with all of you. And what you just saw there with the ADL clips and how they're working with the platform formerly known as Twitter to suffocate voices they don't like while allowing soft porn to proliferate on Twitter is more of the same. So do understand that the next new shiny object, the golden calf, whether it's the world's richest man who has multiple Pentagon contracts for the world's most advanced space weapons program, or for example, it's a new shiny politician who's just emerged from nowhere and has the most smooth talking appearance ever and seems to be saying all of the right things, a bit like Obama was, remember, when he first came along. how many deceptions does it take before we stop being hoodwinked and remember that our critical faculties are there for a reason, and we have to remain conscious and cautious of all of these traps. And the only way you can do that is if you remain grounded. Stop doing this fight or flight reaction, because that's what makes you want saviors, when actually the real saviors are within yourselves. If you remain grounded and connected vertically, horizontally, so spiritually and with everyone around you, think of it as a sphere. If you remain grounded and connected, you won't be so easily deceived in this way. Usman, concluding thoughts. We've gone over time, but it was a lot to cover, and then we'll end the show as well.
Yeah, well, think of this is what's happening with this now, Maajid, is I think there is an awakening.
Yeah,
there's definitely an awakening happening, because as we've seen with even with what the legacy media tried to do with the reinvention of lifestyles, with what they did with this whole woke revolution and destroying franchises that we grew up watching, for example. And then we've seen this like great rebellion now, where all of these companies that used to be making billions from entertainment are now shutting down, companies like Disney and everyone else. The point being with this, that what you've got now is people are seeing, okay, we're being hoodwinked. Yeah, they're seeing that. They're noticing the fact that, you know, when Obama was brought in, and there was almost a deification that went along with Obama. You know, the first black president who's going to change the universe. Yeah, and then we saw the guy who brought in increased drone attacks and
more drone strikes than Bush.
More drone strikes than Bush, and brought in Medicare that had underwritten behind it this whole transgender agenda that now is starting to come out with the Biden administration. So what you then see is, then you have to start being wary of when the violin starts playing, when the music subtly changes, and you feel that little bit of sophistry and that emotional, your limbic system kicks in. Because remember, you're always on the edge of it. You're always on the edge. That's why they can make you cry a tear at the most stupid thing. You're like, I don't even want to say it like this, but everyone's like a bitch nowadays watching their drama. Everyone's watching the soap. Yeah, whereas it used to be the stuff that was made for the housewife, just so she could literally just zone out. Yeah, now it's for everyone. Yeah, whether it's the news, whether it's the music, so everything is the violin playing. Guys, be wary of what you're feeling emotional about, because now there's a different type of thought process you have to get to now, is a more mature thought process of problem solving. And problem solving needs a very, very calm head. Yeah. And higher consciousness actually talks about getting out of the limbic system, getting out of emotional response. But you can't just do that. You can't just like decide, I'm going to get, I've woken up, I'm out of emotional response right now. No, you're not. You've been in the nursery since the age of 3, being trained to emotionally respond. That's why they can come in and say, what does this word mean? Yeah, the word woman doesn't mean woman. The word, everything can get blamed on this. Like, this is the structure that someone else put there. And you're like, wait a minute. If that makes sense to you, then there's a problem, because the person who's presenting this new structure to you is still presenting a structure, isn't it? Still someone's BS, still someone's belief system that you're taking on. So how do you do this? But this is why people used to go out, and that's where the hero's journey starts, isn't it? Problem solving. Yeah, problem solving is a very different. It's very clear. It's quite simple, actually. But simple means that you have to turn TV off. You have to go out and connect. Yeah, it's like Bitcoin isn't going to save everyone. Religion isn't going to save everyone. Yeah, there's the answer to each thing. You're going to need a full spectrum approach. So tune in next week.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. This has been Warrior Creed. As usual, you'll find the podcast file of this live stream eventually on Radical Media. There's a lag, of course. We encourage everybody to tune into the live one, but it does eventually end up for premium subscribers on Radical Media, maajidnawaz.substack.com. And we, as always, will be back with some analysis on current affairs and commentary next Tuesday, same time, hopefully same time, 3 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Osman, any last words before we tune out?
I wasn't going to say keep it real, but I think that's too much of a challenge for people, isn't it? So
I think. Well, listen, keep watching. That's what I'd say. Help us spread word. As you can see, we try and demonstrate through this in our response to current events and current affairs as true as possible and as real as possible that we can. So we're not betraying you, the viewers. And as you know, we're shadow banned on every other platform. And so what helps us is if you spread word through word of mouth, ask people to tune into this so that you can all remain tuned in to these perspectives. And that's really, as these events unfold, we're going to continue commenting on them. And so our request to you is that if you enjoy this content, spread word is the only way this can survive, is if more and more people are tuning in. And frankly, there is too little of this kind of conversation on all other platforms, because what you're seeing instead is either the fight or the flight reactions, and they're not really going to solve anyone's problem. Until next time, this has been Warrior Creed.
Now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
This service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.